Back to the Future. Could it actually happen with a real time machine?
I was devastated. I thought if I could build a time machine that I could go back and see him again and tell him what was going to happen, maybe save his life. And so that became an obsession for me.
Time travel has captivated people for centuries. The thought of journeying through time, whether to revisit the past or glimpse into the future, ignites curiosity and sparks the imagination. This fascination with time travel predates modern blockbusters like Interstellar and Marvel movies. While some question its feasibility, there are intriguing stories of individuals claiming to have experienced it firsthand. For instance, 2 reporters allegedly witnessed a significant news event before it actually occurred. Could time travel truly exist? Join us as we reveal the truth about time machines, the man behind the infamous time machine. In early 1995, Mike Marcum, a 21-year-old student of electrical engineering living in Stanberry, Missouri, started working on building a time machine. His goal was to get rich by going to the future and getting winning lottery numbers. He was said to have lacked formal training. The back porch of his house, where he did most of his experiments, was very messy and looked like a home appliance graveyard with parts of old TVs, radios, and CDs strewn all over the place. Mike had been playing around with a device called Jacob's Ladder when he noticed something strange. Mike was tinkering with Jacob's Ladder, which he had modified. It had a home-built electronic transformer with a power of 20,000 volts. Mike had to create this transformer because the standard household voltage in the US is 120 to 240 volts. For the conductors in Jacob's Ladder, Mike used wire hangers as well as lasers to heat the air around the conductor to take care of air pressure and temperature changes, which could ruin the experiment. While working with the device, Mike claimed to have seen a circular vortex that was 8 inches across. He figured he would test the effect by repeatedly throwing in a sheet metal screw to see what would happen. According to Mike, every time he threw it in, the screw disappeared and reappeared a few feet away a second later. The metal screw, in his opinion, had been transported through time, reappearing when time had caught up. Seeing what had happened with this experiment, Mike was determined to go the extra mile. He was going to build a time machine that would be 8 feet instead of the 8-inch Jacob's Ladder he had used for the initial experiment. But Mike had an enormous challenge ahead of him. He required a lot of power to advance his research to the point where they could work for humans. Furthermore, while he was scaling up his work on the so-called time machine, the device caught fire. Undeterred, Mike reasoned that using bigger transformers to produce higher voltages would be more sensible if he were to rebuild the machine. But that would set him back around $20,000 per transformer. So he decided to break into a local power plant and steal 6 old transformers to continue his work. However, once he attached the transformers to Jacob's Ladder, he sparked a massive blackout on the streets in his neighborhood, shutting down the electrical grid for several hours. Soon after, police arrived at his home with a warrant to search it and took him into custody for stealing the transformers. Mike reportedly admitted to the judge during his trial that he was attempting to find the lottery-winning numbers so that he could raise money for a research facility. After being released from prison a few months later, Mike became well known on local radio by sharing tales of the missing screw and his ambition to create a time machine. The radio show in question, Art Bell's radio show, frequently touched on paranormal topics. Mike was quickly labeled a madman by the host, Art, and he happily took up the moniker. The strange tale of Madman Mike is documented on the radio station's website. While on air, Mike informed Art and his audience that he was out of money and spare parts to carry out his research. He even went so far as to broadcast his phone number live, after which he supposedly received non-stop calls for the following 3 days. His next time machine invention was more ambitious and powerful than the first, thanks to donations from his listeners. He intended to use the device on himself to test it by producing an electromagnetic vortex large enough for a person to walk through. A year later, when he returned to the radio show, Mike was asked what he would bring along in his time travel journey. He indicated he would just bring his phone into the time machine. In 1996, when he appeared on the show, he claimed to be 30 days away from completing his legal time machine. However, in 1997, he vanished without warning and was never heard from again, placing him at the center of one of the greatest mysteries involving time travel. Not long after his disappearance, one of the radio show's listeners called in to share an odd tale they had come upon. According to the listener, police discovered a deceased man on a California beach in the 1930s. The man had been crushed to death inside an odd metal tube, and a strange object that resembled a cell phone had been discovered next to his corpse. But Mike seemed to reappear online in 2022, refuting wild rumors that he had died after traveling to the 1930s. Furthermore, there were reports that he had been interviewed for a third time in 2015 by his local radio station. In February of that year, Mike appeared to post to a blog about paranormal activity using the username Railmadman Marcum. The user had been registered with the website since 2015. He wrote, "Rumors are a-blazing that I am dead, not well, and had time traveled to 1930-something where I died on a beach in a tube. Whoever posted those pictures of a redhead is also not me. It was some school kid with my name that someone long ago attributed to me. Whatever was found in the 1930s was not me, and I've read that it was debunked but can't find the article." In response to a question about his future intentions for a time machine, he said, "Yes, but it is stalled at the moment, until I can get some inverters. I have some 24-volt panels in my bus for a project. They got a little ratty from sitting outside for a bit." While his followers have urged him to provide proof that he is the actual Mike Madman, he has not yet provided any. As such, it is still a mystery whether Mike still exists. Some have speculated that Mike just changed his name and chose to live a low-key life away from the spotlight, while others believe his time machine experiment was actually successful. While many physicists do not believe that time travel is possible, in theoretical physics, several hypotheses and theories suggest that traveling through time might be achievable, although with some major challenges. Let's take a look at a prominent theory that supports the possibility of time travel. Time suddenly slowed down. According to Einstein's theory of general relativity, time is fundamentally linked to space in what is called space-time. When particularly massive objects get near gravitational fields, they can cause time dilation, which is the slowing down of time. This phenomenon has been demonstrated by experiments involving atomic clocks in fast-moving planes or strong gravitational fields. To travel into the past, certain exotic solutions such as closed time-like curves, or CTCs, have been proposed. CTCs are hypothetical space-time loops that permit objects or people to theoretically travel to the past and return to the same place and time they started. Certain solutions to the general relativity equation, such as the Gödel metric, suggest the possibility of rotating worlds that could support CTCs. However, CTCs, as a solution, are not without problems. CTCs give way to paradoxes, such as the well-known grandfather paradox, in which an individual prevents their own existence or creates illogical conclusions. Solving such paradoxes requires careful examination of space-time consistency and causality. Some physicists at MIT have created theories suggesting the use of quantum teleportation and post-selecting what a time traveler could and could not do as a way to avoid the grandfather paradox, but it is still very theoretical. Quantum mechanics also presents another level of difficulty for time travel. A fundamental concept in quantum physics, the uncertainty principle, also known as Heisenberg's indeterminacy principle, suggests that there are innate limitations to the accuracy with which some pairs of properties, such as position and momentum, may be simultaneously known or measured. However, certain interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest that there are alternate timelines or parallel universes where every potential outcome of a quantum event takes place. There are more scientific hypotheses than ever, that lend credence to the possibility of other universes existing in parallel to our own. Still, among the most controversial scientific theories is the multiverse theory. The size of the cosmos in which we live is incredible. Galaxies, with billions or trillions of stars within, whirl around in space in hundreds of billions, if not trillions. According to some scientists examining models of the universe may be 7 billion light-years big in circumference. However, certain scientific theories have investigated, and in some cases validated, the idea that there are worlds outside, parallel to or remote from our own that mirror our own, going beyond what is visible to us in the physical time we live in. Arguments about multiverses and parallel universes are frequently discussed with other important scientific theories, like string theory and the Big Bang theory. It is, however, important to note that these concepts do not support the idea of traveling between these different worlds, as that is largely seen as an impossibility. But even if we could travel between these worlds, would that even be considered time travel? Even with these fascinating theories, there have been several other obstacles in the way of time travel. For example, the energy requirements for time travel pose significant challenges because current technology is not at the necessary level, particularly for traveling through CTCs and exotic matter. While time travel to the past requires the use of wormholes, time travel to the future would require traveling at the speed of light. The reason both kinds of time travel are so challenging to achieve is we have not advanced to the point in technology where we can make objects go faster than light, nor do we have working wormhole machines lying around somewhere. The same is true for the energy required. The majority of time travel theories put forth the need for negative mass or negative energy, neither of which can be found in the universe we exist in. Furthermore, although some physicists have theorized a time machine free of negative matter, that machine also needed more energy than the universe could hold. There is also the problem of dark energy and dark matter. The existence and stability of these dark matters are called into question by their theoretical requirement. Furthermore, the idea of quantum gravity is largely theoretical due to an absence of supporting data and our very limited understanding. When it comes to time travel, we are constantly dealing with concepts and energy that we cannot even understand, not to mention use. Time-traveling ideas are far more complex than we currently understand. As such, time travel, even as a scientific consideration, is more or less speculative than practical. There is simply more to time travel than just hopping in a time machine and punching in the destination's date. Despite the lack of undeniable scientific proof that time travel is possible, there have been notable stories where people claimed to have accidentally traveled to a time different from theirs, like in the mysterious case of Sir Victor Goddard, who accidentally traveled to the future. Who is Sir Victor Goddard? Air Marshal Sir Robert Victor Goddard accidentally traveled 4 years into the future. While still serving as a wing commander in 1935, Sir Goddard was given the task of examining an abandoned airbase in Drem, Scotland, which was close to Edinburgh. Sir Goddard observed this base while flying above it and saw that it was in disrepair and that cattle were grazing on wild grass growing through the cracks of the tarmac. It was clear to him that the airbase was completely deserted and in a terrible condition from neglect. While flying his biplane later on, Sir Goddard encountered a strange storm. Strong winds and storm clouds with a bizarre brownish-yellow hue overtook his aircraft. This made him lose control of his plane, and it began to spiral into a fall. However, he managed to gain control of the plane, and he flew out of the storm into brilliant sunlight. What had previously been a horrible stormy day suddenly turned into a still and beautiful bright day. And if that wasn't weird enough, he also observed that the airbase, which he had previously inspected, was now in excellent condition and was even in operation. He saw some mechanics in blue coveralls working on yellow planes parked on the runway. The strange thing was that the aircraft were different from those the Air Force had in 1935. Interestingly enough, Sir Goddard failed to even identify one of the planes. It was completely beyond his understanding how any renovation work could have been completed in such a short amount of time. Moreover, these mechanics were not even wearing the standard khaki uniforms that mechanics wore in 1935. It also didn't make sense that the planes were yellow because the Air Force painted all their planes in silver. Sir Goddard must have made every effort to explain away the unusual experience, but when he returned to Drem 4 years later, amid a European war, he was in for the shock of his life. At the airbase he had inspected 4 years ago, he saw exactly what he had seen 4 years earlier. He saw the same mechanics in blue coveralls working on the same yellow planes. He even found the plane he had not been able to recognize before, the Miles Magister. Many skeptics have said that Sir Goddard must have gotten confused. They believe he had simply landed somewhere else in 1935, not the abandoned airbase in Drem. But that does not explain away the many details of his incredible story. The Miles Magister, for example, had its first flight in 1937, 2 years after Sir Goddard had seen it on the runway in Drem. The colors of the mechanic uniforms and the planes were not in use until years later, the strange storm that suddenly went away and revealed a bright, sunny day. All these points to a supernatural experience that cannot simply be explained away. Sir Goddard was not the only person to have claimed to accidentally travel in time. Another instance happened when 3 people claimed to have seen a time traveler from the past. Time traveler on Highway 167 spotted. In 1988, Strange Magazine 2 published an article by Ken Moe titled Time Traveler. According to the short narrative, on October 20th, 1969, a man whom the writer called LC and his business partner Charlie was driving along Highway 167 towards the oil center city of Lafayette, Louisiana. They were driving in from Abbeville, Louisiana, where they had had lunch. The time was 1:30 p.m., and it was a beautiful day with a clear blue sky and a cool 60 degrees. As such, they had the windows down and were in cruising mode. As they were driving down the free highway, they noticed a slowly approaching vehicle. They perhaps thought nothing of it until it got close to them, and they noticed the car. It was a strange car. Seeing the old turtleback-type auto, they were immediately intrigued. Now, despite looking like an antique and like a relic from the past, it was in brand new condition, like something you would see in an antique showroom. Being very curious about this car, LC and his business partner took a good look at it as they got near. They noticed it had a distinct-looking large orange license plate with the year 1940. They immediately figured that this kind of antique car could not possibly be legally allowed on the road, except perhaps for ceremonial purposes. LC decided to take a good look at the driver of this vehicle, and was surprised to see that she was a young lady in a really strange attire. She had on a vintage 1940s dress, complete with a hat adorned with colored feathers and a fur coat that looked so out of place in 1969. A small child in a large heavy coat and cap stood on the passenger's seat. Because of the way the child was dressed, it was hard to tell what gender the child was. Beyond the fact that such a style of clothing was completely out of fashion in 1969, what was also strange was that they were wearing such heavy clothes in such cool weather. It did not also make sense that the lady had her windows rolled up when she could have been enjoying the breeze. Pulling up to the car, Elsie and Charlie were alarmed at the animated expression of terror and panic on the lady's face. She looked completely distressed and was looking back and forth as if she was lost or in dire need of assistance. Elsie called out to ask if she needed help, to which she nodded yes. She seemed to be studying Elsie's car with a confused look on her face. You see, older cars from the 40s sat higher than the cars of the 60s, like the one Elsie was driving, so the woman had to look down at them. For some reason, perhaps because she had her windows rolled up, the woman seemed to be struggling to hear Elsie and Charlie. At some point, Elsie gestured for her to park at the side of the road, and after repeated gesturing, she seemed to understand. To their shock and surprise, When they halted at the side and turned to see her, there was no sign of her. Now, Highway 167 is an open road with nowhere to hide a car, so it was quite surprising that there was no sign of her and her car. She had vanished into thin air. Meanwhile, a vehicle that had been behind the antique car parked in front of them. The driver of the car hurriedly came to their vehicle to ask what had happened to the car in front of him. He was so confused that he thought an accident had occurred between Elsie's car and the antique car. The three men exchanged stories of what they had just witnessed. The third man, an out-of-towner, wanted them to go to the police because he believed it was a missing persons case. But Elsie and his friend refused because they did not know where the lady and the child had gone. The three exchanged numbers and addresses, and for years they kept in touch to confirm that what they had seen was not a figment of their imagination. What remains unexplainable is whether the lady and her child were time travelers from 1940 or were forever stuck in limbo, appearing in different timelines but never going back to their own. While LC, his business partner, and the out-of-towner witnessed a time traveler from the past, these two newsmen witnessed a news story 11 years before it even happened. Watching viral news 11 years back in time, in the Little Giant Book of Eerie Thrills and Unspeakable Chills, authors Ron Edwards, C.B. Colby, and John Macklin document the strange tale of two men who witnessed an event 11 years before it actually happened. In 1932, reporter J. Bernard Hutton and photographer Joachim Brandt were out covering the Hamburg shipyard in Germany for a feature story they were working on. Just as Hutton and Brandt were about to leave the building after finishing their mission, they heard the sound of aircraft engines and looked up to find a sky full of fighter planes. The anti-aircraft batteries had come into action as bombs were being dropped and detonated. In a flash, the area had turned into a full-blown war zone. There was mayhem and death everywhere. Things were exploding everywhere, and buildings were crumbling on impact. Before running outside to try to save their lives, Hutton had asked a security guard if there was anything they could do to help, but was told to leave the area immediately. Afraid for their lives and unsure of what was happening, the two drove towards Hamburg. But as they got into Hamburg, they noticed that things had changed. The sky had cleared up and everything was back to normal. Gone was the chaos and the violence. The buildings were fine, and no one seemed to be panicking. It was almost as if they had not just been running from massive airstrikes. When Hutton and Brandt looked behind towards the shipyard, they couldn't spot anything out of place. There was no damage, no smoke coming from the buildings, not even a wisp. As expected, the newspaper office did not believe the two men's tale, and who can blame them? Brandt, who had quickly shown the photos he had been taking during the attack, must have been shocked to see that everything appeared normal in them. The shipyard appeared brand new. Their co-workers dismissed their wild tale of woe, thinking that they had to have stopped for a drink and had one too many. To them, the men's perception had been distorted by the alcohol. Afterward, shortly before the start of World War II, Bernard Hutton relocated to London. In 1943, what he read in a newspaper one morning left him in utter shock. He must have thought someone was playing a horrible prank on him. The details of a story he was reading about a Roy Air Force squadron's successful raid on a Hamburg shipyard struck him as strange and uncanny. It was an exact recreation of what he and Brandt had witnessed 11 years back. While we have been touching on stories of people who happen to travel through time or witness time travel without doing anything about it, this particular man was determined to make it big from his experience of time travel. The time-traveling con man. On January 28, 2003, a man known as Andrew Carlson was arrested by the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, on suspicion of insider trading. You see, in a period of just 2 weeks in the stock market, Andrew was able to go from having just $800 to a whopping $350 million. He was said to have made a total of 126 high-risk trades without losing a single penny. Everything he touched seemed to turn to gold, almost as if he possessed the Midas touch. Making the kind of profit he achieved in the stock market in such a short time was thought to be impossible. This made the Securities Exchange Commission extremely suspicious, and the FBI was called in to arrest and investigate him on allegations of fraud and insider trading. In an unexpected turn of events, as he was being questioned by the FBI when he was in their custody, he stated that he was from the year 2256. He claimed that because he was from the future, he knew exactly how the stocks would perform, which was why he was able to make so many profitable deals. Carlson also claimed to be able to prove his time-traveling powers by providing details about Osama bin Laden's whereabouts and the treatment for AIDS. Naturally, the cops did not think he was telling the truth. Although they believed he was kidding or lying, he appeared to vanish completely from the face of the earth shortly after being out on bond. Despite many efforts by the feds, every search for him turned up empty. It is interesting to note that Carlson wasn't an overnight sensation, but bizarrely, his story starts with his unexpected appearance in the early 2000s. Before then, there were no records indicating he was ever alive, no birth certificate, school records, medical records, driving license, nothing. Many have claimed that Andrew Carlson could not have been a time traveler because he was not able to convince the feds of that fact while he was under their custody. Some have said he was merely a very good scam artist who was able to evade the government and anyone looking for him. But here's an interesting fact. It is said that he correctly predicted the exact date of the US invasion of Iraq. Thanks for watching these interesting accounts of time travelers. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more interesting videos.